good afternoon, good evening. I wanted to use this video to explore the first topic that we'll be exploring as part of the Effortless Everything program beginning in the fall. And that topic is the fullness of life. And it's an expression that I first heard it in the context of the Bible, the New Testament. There's various translations of where Jesus says, I wish you, or I come to bring you life in all its fullness, or life abundant. And there's a quote I remember from drama school from Aeschylus, and I wrote this one down because I didn't think I was going to remember this. Man was not made for safe havens. The fullness of life is in the hazards of life. And the version of it, though, that really has been speaking to me lately is from a book called The Fullness of Life by Edith Wharton. And there's a passage that I marked out. And so this woman dies, and she's speaking to the spirit of life. And she's kind of excited that she's died because she thinks, maybe I'll finally learn how to live. And the spirit of life says, have you never really known what it is to live? I have never known, she replied, that fullness of life which we all feel ourselves capable of knowing, though my life has not been without scattered hints of it, like the scent of earth which comes to one sometimes far out at sea. So I'm going to briefly kind of touch on how all three of those land for me and why I think it's worthy of some depth and exploration. So the first one, I come to bring you life in all its fullness, life abundant. Well, why would we want that? I mean, it sounds obvious that, well, that's, of course we want it all. We don't just want little bits of it. But we don't live mostly as if we want the fullness of life. We live as if we want the good bits. We want the bits that are going to look good in our social media feed. We want the bits that are going to engender admiration or sympathy or whatever it is that we think we need or want from the outside world. We don't necessarily want all the bits in the middle, and we're not too sure about the bits at the kind of not great end of the spectrum from a health and well-being and prosperity point of view. So we tend to think of the fullness of life as, this is great. I'm glad, somebody's come to bring me life in all its fullness, but could you maybe not, just leave it outside and I'll get the bits that I want. And I think that kind of speaks to the Aeschylus version, which man was not made for safe havens. The fullness of life is in the hazards of life. Well, the hazards of life, it seems to me, are things like relationship. They're things like going out and taking on a project you don't know whether or not you can succeed at. They're in trying to raise and care for a family, even though it would be so much easier to not. It would be so much easier to not try and peacefully coexist with another human, or to take on the health and welfare and well-being of a family unit or a group unit, or to try and take on the challenge of growing a business or creating change in the world. But it is in those situations that we experience ourselves most fully. And so for me, I can't hear the expression, the fullness of life, without thinking about it in terms of the fullness of you, the fullness of me, the fullness of the human experience, where we laugh all our laughter and we cry all our tears. It's the richness of life. It's the depth of life. It's the meaningfulness of life that we crave. And that's why we can spend an extraordinary amount of time doing things we don't really care about, hoping that if we get enough of the surface of life, that will make up for not being fulfilled, not being filled full of life itself. And life itself, as I see it, is a feeling. Life is feelingful. Being alive is filled with the feeling of aliveness. And we can call that feeling love. We can call that feeling joy. We can call it peace. We can call it presence. But it is a very abundant feeling. Now, for most of my life, certainly for large chunks of my life, the idea of feeling more fully, I won't even say it was terrifying, because it was such a clearly bad idea that I wasn't terrified of it, because it was never going to happen. If I needed to clamp down on this thing 10 times harder, I was gonna, right? And I did it mostly with my intellect. I did it occasionally with supplementation from drugs and alcohol. But distraction sometimes worked, just keep myself really busy. Whatever it took to not feel the fullness of life. But in fairness, it wasn't the fullness of life that scared me. It was the feeling of life. Because the feeling of life came with some feelings I didn't think I could cope with. It did come with sadness. It came at times with anger. For me, it came with a fairly constant sense of fear and anxiety and worry. And so while I would have loved the fullness of nice feelings, the fullness of joy and peace and well-being, I didn't know how to have one without suffering the other. And I think that's why the Sid Banks quote that I have in the front of the Inside Out Revolution was so meaningful to me. If the only thing people learned was not to be afraid of their experience, that alone would change the world. And for me, that alone has changed my world. As I've realized that I want all the experiences. I have a friend who was diagnosed with cancer, almost a decade ago now, and they're fine. They're doing well. But the biggest change when I've spoken with them about what's changed since then is they said, "Oh, I want to live all the ages and all the things now." Right? Before, and this is quite common, we fear getting older, or we fear certain life experiences that we kind of know are likely or inevitable or certainly possible. And so we just kind of keep our lives small. Not because we want small lives, but because we fear the weight of feeling that we think might come with a bigger life if we were to play a bigger game. But the funny thing is, regardless of the size of the game you are playing in life, your experience of life is always going to be felt. And how much of that feeling you allow to filter through, to fill you up, to overflow from you, determines how fulfilled, how alive, how much enjoyment, how much passion, how much pleasure you are able to take in the games of life and in the feeling of being alive. Now, the fullness of life, the feeling of life, is by its nature a spiritual feeling. Now, I don't mean a religious feeling, even though some of my references here have religious overtones. I mean spiritual, of spirit, of the invisible, formless energy and intelligence behind life that the Scottish mystic Sid Banks called the divine mind, the universal mind, that some people call God, that some people might call Spirit or the Holy Spirit. Some people would just go, oh, you mean life? Yeah, I mean all of it. Not the words, but that which the words are attempting to describe, that which this little conversation is designed to evoke. So just take a minute and you can close your eyes, you can keep your eyes open, but tune in. And tune into your body. Just tune into you. And how alive are you right now? Now, it's going to be an arbitrary scale. If you go 4, that's not going to be relevant compared to somebody else's 48 or somebody else's 1. But how alive are you? How much of the fullness of life are you experiencing right now? When you think about your day to day, a typical day, how full of life are you? Not just physical energy, because physical energy waxes and wanes. There are a lot of things behind physical energy. But literally aliveness. Something I've always found interesting is people can walk into a company, people can walk into a household, people can walk into almost anywhere. And if you ask them, is this place thriving? They'll be able to answer. And if you ask them, well, how do you know? They might go, well, look at all the people, or hear the buzz of the sound, or look at all the flowers. But actually, there's a feeling underneath that. Because you can walk into a thriving business when it's closed and still feel the buzz. You can look at a garden when it's shut down for the winter season, and you can still sense that it's a thriving garden, that it's filled with life, and even though in that moment the life is quiet in form, come spring, oh, it's gonna bloom. And so the invitation for all of us is, are we up for experiencing more of the fullness of life? The feeling fullness of life? Are we up for experiencing more of the fullness of ourselves? Are we willing to fill up with life to the point where it is overflowing from us out into the world? And then if so, well, how do we get more of that? And that's going to be what we're going to be exploring when we get together. Have fun, learn heaps, and I'll talk with you soon.